Joyce, I want to start with you. Let's talk about this new reporting from the Times. What would it mean if Trump's own attorney falsified a statement to the DOJ?
So what this does, Alicia, is it highlights how dependent we are on understanding the facts, what actually happened here, before we can reach any understanding of whether this is really just an effort by DOJ to reclaim these classified materials, or whether this is an investigation that's pointed, that's perhaps headed towards indictments, because that will be heavily fact dependent. But situations like the one that you're discussing, that we're newly learning about tonight, where people affirmatively took steps to conceal these important materials. It wasn't just a mistake or perhaps a certain amount of ineptitude, although gross negligence can be a criminal violation. If this looks like an intentional effort to keep these documents at Mar-a-Lago to cover up the fact that classified materials were missing, then we're in a situation where there will be a lot more scrutiny and consideration of potential prosecution.
Joyce, I just want to dig into a word you used there, which was ineptitude, because that has often been a defense that we've heard the Trump team use for a variety of conduct and misconduct. So I wonder, when you hear aides, former aides, saying, well, he would often take stuff, we always worried about his mismanagement. If that is the direction that they are moving in, that he simply didn't know how to handle these documents, not that there was anything nefarious going on.
So, look, as a prosecutor looking at that sort of situation, I'd be highly suspicious. This is the President of the United States. Not only has he been repeatedly briefed by his White House counsel and others on his staff about how records retention works, this is also the man who campaigned on Lock Her Up, on his complaints about Hillary Clinton's handling of classified information. I think every statement he made about Hillary Clinton would come into evidence if there were a criminal trial, to show that he was aware of the landscape, he understood the obligations, and he also understood that it was a problem when people didn't comply with them. Of course, ultimately, Clinton was cleared because there was no knowing engagement, no knowing involvement with classified material. She certainly made no effort to pass materials on to other people, turned everything over when she was asked to. So Trump's situation is very different. But I think he is not some sort of a novice player on the chessboard here.
And if that were invoked in that situation, wow, talk about things coming full circle. Hugo, the reason we're talking about this is because these classifications, they tell you that the documents that were in hand were highly sensitive, right? That they were concerned about the damage that could be done, right? That there could be grave damage based on this. It is why you now have Congress asking for a damage assessment. Do you have a sense of what it is they are asking for, what they are looking for?
Yeah, so a letter went out from the House Intelligence and House Oversight Committees to the Director of National Intelligence. And basically, they're seeking at this moment a briefing on the kind of damage that could be done to the United States and to potential allies of the United States as a result of these documents being improperly kept at Mar-a-Lago. I talked to some people close to those committees, and there is an expectation that the members on those committees in a classified setting might ask about the kinds of documents that the FBI recovered from Mar-a-Lago. So I think that's kind of where Congress is at. I mean, certainly in Trump world, there is a recognition tonight that a lot of these documents are really sensitive. And I think people are starting to come around to the fact that maybe they shouldn't have been at Mar-a-Lago.